And get started here, John. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie, one of the solutions architects here at Extensive. John's going to be the one hosting today and actually going over that. We are going to have a time where we're going to allow questions, and we'll let you guys unmute yourselves and speak as well about your questions, or maybe if you have a follow-up. But if any questions do come up while John is presenting, please go ahead and present them in chat. I will either answer them in chat or I'll pitch it up to John at the end of the meeting here. So go ahead, John. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Can you everybody hear me? Or can you hear me, Charlie? All right, great. All right, I'm John Berger. I'm a solutions architect here, along with Charlie, my counterpart, and been here with the company for about 5 years now as a solutions architect. Prior to that, I was a customer of the system for 10 years, working for a warehouse out of Salt Lake City as the IT guy. So got about 15 years in the system now. What we're going to do today is we're going to do a walkthrough of kind of some of the basic first initial things that you would do. A lot of you may have gone through this in implementation originally, but this is just kind of a refresher overview for kind of everybody and just kind of an opportunity to kind of talk about some of that functionality here. We will go through the presentation first. We got a lot to cover in a little bit of time, and then we'll actually do questions afterwards. So of course, you can't ask questions in the chat, of course, chats. There will be people trying to attempt to help answer those questions in the chat, and then we'll get to kind of everything else there. So to begin with, let me share my screen. So we'll go ahead and go up here. Give me one moment. And just make a couple of minor adjustments, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, so I am at Hub, basically, where you get into your different apps. Mine looks a little bit different. I've got a lot of the different apps enabled here. Many of you are going to see just the 3PL Warehouse Manager or maybe Integration Manager and Warehouse Manager. So we will go ahead and jump in. We'll hit 3PL Warehouse Manager here. Okay, now that we're into the WMS, we're going to start by going to the left, and we're going to talk warehouse basic setups. Or actually, I'm sorry, we're supposed to start with user and permission setup. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. Apologize. We're going to go back to Hub. We're going to go to users right here. And as many of you know, you will set up your users from Hub, basically. You'll come in here. If you're creating a warehouse user or a customer user, you have the different sections to set up your users. I'm going to go to a test environment here. And in this test environment, we'll go ahead and just kind of walk through setting up a user really quick. We'll hit create user. And I'll just make up an extra one. Okay. We'll come in and obviously put an email address. I'm just going to use my work one. So, oh, plus. You can actually do this to create aliases. Some of you have situations where you have warehouse employees. You need to create users for those warehouse employees, but you don't necessarily want to give an email address to everybody. This is a good trick for kind of setting up maybe a warehouse user. Anything that you put after the plus will go ahead and set up an alias, basically. So we'll go in here and we'll go to extensiv.com. Okay, there we go. So my real email address is without the plus part right here. This makes it an alias email address, gives me a way to set up more emails if I need to. I'll come down here. I'm going to put a job title in. This is really just for your purposes to look at this. I'm going to play IT specialist today, so we'll go ahead and use that one. We'll go ahead and hit next at this point. We get in, we select a role. Is this a customer user? Is this a manager, a system admin? What is our role here? So we're going to go ahead and say, I'm a system admin. By the way, this is a 3PL. No, this is still a hub level role. So we'll go ahead and say system admin. What this is controlling right here is what rights I have when I get into hub. Can I add other users? Can I adjust company information? So you may want to restrict this. By the way, there is a view only option here that will allow you to actually pass the user. The user will still have to come into hub, but they can't adjust or change anything in hub. They can just select the products that you've approved them to select to get in. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and give this role. In fact, I'm going to give it the view only access. Go ahead and go to next. Now, let me just go back here a second. I need to add a product. So I made a mistake. I did that on purpose to demonstrate that is what I'm going with, right? So anyway, we'll just back up a little bit here. We'll go ahead and say 3PL warehouse manager right here. We can select our role. In 3PL warehouse manager, you have your different roles. Internal users, you can set up different role access. We'll talk about role access in just a minute. For the moment, I'm going to go ahead and set this person up as a just warehouse admin for now, and then we'll go and talk about rules and what those do. So when we come in here to classic view, this is an older part of the system. Some of the reporting and stuff still depends on this role. It is really important that you set this up if you want people to be able to see the roles. While we're looking at this, what we're going to see is there's a whole bunch of these different role settings in here. If it's an internal warehouse user, I would just give them level 0 access at this point. At some point, we will phase this out and you won't have to worry about this anymore as we do some updates to the reporting and things like that. But right now, you do need to assign a role. You need to assign classic access as well. Okay. By the way, if this were a customer role that I was setting up, the rules are the classic view access would look different. You would see a cus, 1, 2, 3, 4. Use cus 6 for all customer level roles. There really isn't a lot of fluctuation there, so just stick to cus 6. And you'll see this in the help documentation where it talks about how to set up user roles and stuff like that. We spelled that out pretty well. By the way, if I needed to add other products, let's say integration manager, billing manager, some of those others, I can do this from here too. We're not going to talk about those products today. We're just going to stick with 3PL warehouse manager, but we will go back and talk about some of those on different dates. All right, so we'll go ahead and go next. Now that I'm in here, I have different warehouses that I've set up, and we haven't really talked about setting up the warehouses yet, but we'll come back to that. So in here, basically at this point, I'll go ahead and just turn on a warehouse for this customer. You do need to turn on at least, sorry, not customer, user. You do need to set up at least one warehouse for this user to be able to get in and do anything. They won't be able to have visibility to customers and stuff like that in some instances. So it is important that you give them access. By the way, if you're setting up a warehouse user, you are not able to lock a warehouse user to a specific customer, but you can lock a warehouse user to a specific warehouse right now. There are requests for that being able to lock to a specific customer. That's something that we are evaluating, but we don't have that set up at this point. So we'll go ahead and move forward and hit next. Now, this is really just, do I want to set up a personal temporary password? If I switch this on, it's going to let me put in a password to give the person to let them log in. Otherwise, you can just let the system send them an email. It'll, give them a temporary password. They can log in and change their password. So at this point, I would hit finish and save. I'm not going to actually create this user all the way. I just wanted to walk through that as an example for you, but that does give you a good idea of what it looks like. The email that you get is pretty self-explanatory, just says click here. You go in and change your password, pretty much it. Once you've done all that, we're able to get into the system. So we're going to come back here. We're going to go to extensive. We're going to go to 3PL warehouse manager. Once we're into 3PL warehouse manager, let's talk about user roles for just a moment. So obviously, you've got to have permissions to be able to use the system as we go through here. There are some system defined roles already. So where it says read only, over here on the right, you see the yeses. These are kind of the predetermined system roles that we release to you when we set up the system, or we provision for you when we set up the system. As we go through these, we're not able to actually make any edits. You can see the edit is grayed out here. And so what you want to do at this point, you can either create a brand new role, or you can select one of these roles that might be close to the roles that you need. Go ahead and hit manage and hit copy role. So if we copy that role, we can come in and put the name, basically of that role, whatever we want to call that. So I'm basing this off of a customer role at the moment. I could come in here and say, like I already have over here, actually, we've got a customer dash basic, a customer dash admin. Those are probably sufficient, but I can actually come in and say the role name. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go over here. I'm going to open one of those existing roles so we can just look at the differences quickly. We're not going to spend too much time in here, but I'm going to point out a couple of things. Number one, I can go in, create roles, clone a role, make changes to it. We have the expand option here. You can go ahead and expand it all out right here. One thing that you need to know, one of the differences between warehouse roles and customer roles is that some of these permissions will not work in a customer role. Red permissions, we're basically saying you shouldn't really give this to your customer. I'm not saying don't give it to your customer, but what we are saying is that, best practice is probably not to give this to your customer. Now, in some instances, these red roles might work and they might not work. We haven't really spelled that out in all the documentation here yet. But at some point we'll go back and update. But I would just recommend don't use the red roles. Unless you have a specific need. And at that point, if you're going to enable a red role for a customer role, you need to go in and actually test that and make sure it works before you give it to your customer. Or you can reach out to the customer success team to set up a meeting with either Charlie or myself to go through and kind of talk about this and test with you. So if you look on the left-hand side, we'll go ahead and we'll highlight here over these roles. You can see that as I highlight over the roles, I get a good description on the right of what that role does. In fact, let's just jump over. We'll use a warehouse role now. In fact, let's look at the scanner user role really quick. And I like the expand button here, but there's a lot of information on this page when you're running through and looking at things. I can scroll through and kind of see what's enabled and not enabled here and decide, check boxes to enable things or not enable. Get my description, but the description floats at the top at the moment. So if we come up here, let's collapse those all. The more effective way to kind of use this screen, if I'm looking for a setting, I could just start typing it into the filter. That kind of brings everything here, and then I can still see my description over here on the right. So, um, but we'll go ahead and we'll basically stop there with user roles. I think we've covered everything. Charlie, anything you can think of that I didn't mention right there?
Nope, nope. Just I know a question that came out was what level should they use for a picker packer, just for the scanner app as far as levels.
Yeah, good question. So I do have a scanner user set up here. I'll go ahead and do an edit. The difference in a scanner user and maybe a warehouse user is maybe you want to restrict them to just using the mobile device. You can see we do have a mobile scanner option here if we expand that out. Each of the buttons that you typically see on the Smart Scan screen, in fact, let's pull up Smart Scan here really quick and we'll just kind of show you. But you can actually restrict access to each of these. It'll just hide the button, is all it's really going to do. So we can go in here and we can actually just uncheck those options if we want to. And you can see if we expand these out, we can see permissions within those options. So a mobile user, you might want to go ahead and put them on that mobile scanner, or if they also need to get into the WMS, you might look at some of these other roles here. For example, order module, receipts module. This is talking about the orders here and the receipts over here. So you have some settings in there that you can go set. Okay. All right. I think we have a time for one more quick question from there, Charlie, if you had another one that you want to throw out.
None others that came up, but we'll see if there's anyone else. So let it go ahead. If someone has
Actually,
any,
we'll
go ahead
just
and mute yourself.
take the opportunity to move forward.
Perfect.
Cover the rest of this stuff. So, all right, we'll go ahead and hit exit here. But that's kind of a brief intro to roles. Again, there's some pretty good documentation out there in the Help Center on this. There are also the university courses. If you hit help here, go to resources down here. I really recommend that all of you take the time to go through the university. It's free. Go in there, create a user, go through those courses. It's a good opportunity to kind of see the basic flows in the system. Obviously, there can be variations in how those flows can work. That's where Charlie and I sometimes come in to talk to you and help you kind of figure out different ways to do that. Also, obviously, we have other options there that your CSM can provide if you run into a question on workflows and things like that. So always reach out to your CSM if you have any questions. They will help you get to the right resource, basically. All right, from there, let's see. Next, we're going to go to warehouse settings. So now we're going to go here to warehouse. We're going to go to manage warehouse. And one of the first things that you're going to see, I've got the create button here. Warehouses are builds typically per warehouse. So you will need to reach out to the CSM team when you need to add another warehouse. They will add the warehouse for you. But as we come down here, you can see I've got some warehouses that are active and inactive. Um, I'll mention at this point that, some of these inactivated warehouses, the history for the customers that have operated in those warehouses are stored within those warehouses. So if you deactivate or inactivate a customer, a warehouse, the history is in that warehouse, very specifically. Um, we'll come to this warehouse though. We'll kind of look at some of the settings here. We'll go ahead and hit edit. And some of this is really basic. I need to put in a warehouse name. Warehouse code is whatever we call it. At the company I came from, we use the first four numbers of the street address. Were our warehouse codes. Obviously, this is good information to put in. This warehouse address information here is actually sourced for reports like bill of lading, or other documents that might show your warehouse address or for billing. So it is important to put an address in per warehouse. This wouldn't be necessarily a billing address here. There are places to override a billing address, but this should be the warehouse's physical address, because that's going to be your return address on different documents. If we go to accounts here, this is an older piece of the system. I'll just call out that I can't think of a place this is really in use right now. So just go ahead and pass through this. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you have a specific purpose or you've been instructed by somebody here to use this particular tab. Okay. We'll go to customizations. All right, on the customizations page, as we run through this, external warehouse code, that's more of an internal use for API or EDI integrations. You can put something in there if you want to, but it is not required. Number of fields per location. We're going to look at this when we start looking at location setups. In fact, we'll go ahead and just open that up now so we can see it. That way we can just kind of be clear on what that is. So if we go to my warehouse, warehouse one, by the way, I went to warehouse, I went to manage locations. Under the manage locations, I've got all my different locations listed. If I select just one of those locations and hit edit, this is what we'll be talking about next. What I'm doing here though, is I'm just saying, am I using the first position? Am I using all four positions? And while we're here, we might as well mention that really from a system standpoint, if you put something in each of these boxes, the system is going to assume that you're using a dash or a hyphen basically in your barcode. So when you look at a label that you might put on your locations, you'll have the barcoded value. So you scan that with the scanner, and whatever comes out is the barcoded value, right? If your barcoded value has a dash in it, you could separate out here basically to represent that dash. But it is assumed that if you put something in each of these boxes, that the barcoded value has a dash. And that's the way we align basically when you're scanning. You can also put the dash in manually and put everything in the first box. There's warehouses that do it both ways. If you don't have dashes, you do need to put everything in the first box. Okay. So all three of those are technically valid ways they will work. There is not really anything that's going to require you to do it one way or the other. Okay. So we're going to come back here to warehouses, and I just wanted to explain that piece really quick because that's what it's asking here. Are you going to use the first position or are you going to use all four positions? Okay. I like just using the first position, so that's what I'm doing. When we go to measurement standards, we've got imperial and metric here. It is important to note that you need to choose either imperial or metric at the warehouse level to be able to use specifically metric. If you want to use metric, it needs to be set at the warehouse level to be able to use it on item levels. That is something that we're exploring, getting a little bit more advanced functionality on metric at parts levels and stuff like that. But right now, you do need to set that as metric at the warehouse level. Okay. This option right here is actually a pretty important option. This use only predefined locations. I've got it checked, but what that does is it makes you set up and define your locations here. That way you can't just declare a location on a receiver or, the biggest problem is on a receiver import template. If you're basically filling out an import template and you put the same location in different ways, let's say, um, well, if the location doesn't exist already, it won't let you use it on the import template. If you don't have this option checked, the import template can create locations that can lead to duplicates, basically. So it's a really good idea to have this box checked. Okay. All right. Prevent partial order, sorry, prevent partial order allocation, manual allocation. So really all this is saying is if the order can't be fully satisfied, it's not going to allow the system to create the order, basically to reject the order. Enable replenishments. We'll get into replenishments a little bit more, but this is the kind of first place that you turn on replenishments in the system is at the warehouse level. So we'll save that discussion for a different day. Smart Pack. Smart Pack require scan to pack is a recent feature that we just added. If you want to make sure that somebody is required to use the scanner option as opposed to being able to click, you would want to use the require scan to pack. That is for small parcel suite, by the way. Smart Pack is a element of small parcel suites. Okay. Enable cross customer pick jobs is a brand new feature as well. So this is giving you the ability as you're creating a pick job to be able to select more than one customer. Still, the functionality is the same as it's always been. You're just able to select, orders from different customers. Okay. Cycle count settings. We aren't going to talk cycle count today. We'll talk about that more when we get into item setups, which is going to be a different webinar. But cycle count settings, this is basically a setting to say the maximum number of cycle counts that you would want to have automatically generated. Okay. We'll talk more about that when we get into cycle counts. All right. So that's kind of really the standard warehouse settings. There's not a lot of settings here, but we just wanted to cover a couple of those. In particular, I would pay attention to this use only preferred locations. And then the other elements here can have some important settings as well, like the metric. Okay. Charlie, anything else you want to add there, or anybody have a quick question that we can answer before we move on?
Yeah, just had a question of like what you should choose if you use both imperial and metric.
Um,
But
that's a
yeah,
good question.
what I responded with is whatever you would like your reporting to be, because that's what it'll default to. But
Yeah,
just
that
so
is the
everyone is
answer.
aware, yeah, you can still change it at the item level as well.
Yeah. But at the item level, though, you have to have metric if you want to use metric at the item level. So in that scenario, you probably want to set metric, and then the system will allow you to use imperial at the item level. It'll allow you to set it at the item level if you have imperial at the warehouse level. But some of the reports just don't function the same way. So, okay. Um, let's jump on to locations. I'm going to leave that manage warehouse tab open so that we can go through that if we need to. So when we look at locations, you've got the different tabs. It really just scrolls you down the page here. So all the settings really are on the same page. So as we talk about this, I'm just going to scroll down the page and then we'll hit all the settings here. So basic information, we talked about this piece already, how you basically, this is the address of the location. It does need to match whatever's in the barcode is the most important part. You can have a different human readable value on those labels if you want to, the portion that somebody can read. So if I put this in as ABF here, and then on the label, the barcode is ABF without the dashes, the human readable can be A-B-F if I want it to be, basically. That does not affect how the system functions. All right, location type identifiers. Let's kind of walk through this really quick. So these are your different location types. You have storage locations, you have staging locations, you have put away vehicles, quarantines, and pick lines. It's important to note right now that let's see, storage locations and pick line locations is where most of your functionality is right now. There is a part of the system when it's allocating that looks at this location type before it moves on to the next step in the allocation process. This is actually the first step. And really all it's trying to do here is decide if it should send somebody to a pick line location or a storage location for that line on the order, basically. We're not going to jump into the allocation logic right at this point, but just know that this is the first step in the allocation process. There is a help article that discusses allocation if you want to dive into it before we get to that in actual discussions. Um, or actually, are we? Let's see. We're going to talk about that right after this section. So we'll go through that a little bit more. Okay. So quarantine, by the way, when we're looking at this, the quarantine locations, if you set a quarantine location and product is in that location or product is moving into that location, that's an automatic hold. That product will stay on hold as long as it's in that location. So you can move things either with the scan gun or obviously with the system into or out of quarantine locations. As soon as you move them out of those locations, it will automatically remove those quarantines or holds. Okay. Put away vehicle, we're not using yet. There is basically a future use for that we're kind of looking at. So we'll kind of reveal that as it comes out later. But it's been in the system for a while. It is an opportunity to use that. I would tell you from a identification standpoint, if you are using vehicle locations, I think it's great to go ahead and use that for now. Location description. This is just obviously a place that you can put a name for the location. This can be sourced for reporting, kind of different purposes. Pick path is a pretty important one. Now, pick path does not affect allocation. Some people that I'm talking to and some of the calls that we're on, they think the pick path is going to control the way stuff goes into the order. It doesn't do that. Allocation logic is what controls things going into the order, what's assigned, what inventory is used on an order. Pick path has to do with the way it's presented, either on a pick ticket or on the scan gun. So when you go out with the scan gun and you're looking at the screen and it's telling you where to go, that's what pick path is going to do for you. So, and really what's important with pick path, it does need to be a number, one through whatever. It does need to be unique for each location. You don't want to put, it's not like you're going to put ones on 10 different locations for the pick path. That's just going to confuse it basically. So it'd be best to go one through 999 million, basically. Hopefully you don't have that many locations. That would be a big warehouse. Um, all right. Now, when we get down to this non-pickable versus pickable, we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into replenishment, but just know that this non-pickable option gives you the ability to make it so the allocation logic does not use this location to assign products for an order. Okay. So basically it would get skipped. That can be valid if you have situations where maybe you have pick line locations, you want to force the system to go to the pick line locations as opposed to a storage location. This can be a way of kind of forcing that. Keep in mind that all these location settings that we're talking about, these are across all of your customers. This is the very foundation, so whatever you set up here is going to affect every future customer you have. And there are things you need to think about, like, am I going to do expiration dates on product? Am I going to do, what does this product need? First in, first out, first expired, first out, things like that. First in, first out, first expired, first out as allocation methods come after this location type setting and this allocation priority that we're going to come to here in just a moment. Okay. All right, so non-pickable is an option there. By the way, when we flip through these location options, if we go to storage location, you can see that now I have the ability to make this a replenishable location. By the way, this only happens if you turn on the replenishment option at the warehouse level. This will not show up until you set that setting at the warehouse level. When we go to a pick line location, then the behavior changes slightly. That has to be a pickable location because it's a pick line location. And that has to be a replenishable location because pick line locations are typically replenishable. All right, so those are your different types. Just know that there is logic in the system that relies on this type. And by the way, if you're choosing pick line location, when we get into item setup and we talk about item setup, you've got your different units of measure. You should not be using a pick line location if your unit of measure on your item page, and I'm going to show you this because it's actually really important. This is where people actually get hung up quite a bit. But your item setup, if we go to edit, and we go to this unit of measure right here, your primary unit must be different than your secondary unit. Sorry, not secondary unit, packaging unit. So primary unit is in each here. My packaging unit, the quantity has to be greater than one. If this is 1 to 1, do not set this as a pick line location. That is not the way the functionality is going to work. What will happen there, your expectation is, hey, I want it to go to the pick line, but because everything is a multiple of one on that quantity, because the system is basically saying, you know, where do I send you based off the number of units in the packaging unit? It is going to send you off to the storage location every time. It'll never make it to the pick line location if this quantity right here is one. Okay. So we'll come back here. We'll just kind of look through this really quick. I think we've covered all of these fields. That piece can feel a little bit complicated, but again, there is an article on allocation to kind of run through. And we'll continue to talk about allocation as we go through the rest of these steps. Charlie, any questions or anything you want to add there?
No, so far so good.
All right. Allocation priorities. This is a fun one. Allocation priorities basically is the ability to come in here and set a number. What you're doing here is you're just saying how important is this location compared to all the other locations. Again, as we step through the allocation logic, first we're looking at, do we need to send you to a pick line location or do we need to send you to a storage location? When we come down to allocation priority, we're saying, hey, what is the most important location in those groups? And remember, you got two different groups. If you go to pick line locations, we're going to start shopping priorities. We're going to start at 0, work all the way up to the highest number. Lowest number is the most important. Same thing with storage locations. We're always going to go to the lowest priority, roll our way back up to the highest priority, and look for product. By the way, if you do set a pick line location and there's no product available in a pick line location, we will roll over to the storage locations that are not marked as non-pickable. Okay. So what you need to know about allocation priority, this is a pretty good example on this page right here. You really want to make sure, unless you completely and totally understand how allocation priority is going to affect your warehouse and your locations, you should use the same number across the board. That'll allow the system to kind of evaluate first in, first out. And remember, in these steps, we haven't even made it to whether the system is going to use first in, first out or first expired, first out. So really best practice in general for most people, set this at the same number all the way across the board. Because let's say I have product that comes in that is brand new product and it goes into one of these 99999 locations. But I have aging product sitting in this 20 location. Sorry, that's reverse. If I have aging product sitting in these 9999s, but I have new product come in to this 20 location, this 20 is a lower value. The system is going to take that newer product that should not go out before the aging product, before it gets that other aging product. That aging product could be sitting in those locations and aging out to the point that it's now expired. Your customer is going to be upset. I actually had this happen to me at one point when I was a customer of the system. So it's really important to understand this particular feature before you try to use it. I would call this more of an advanced feature. So, but make sure it is a good idea as you create locations to go in, double check all your locations, make sure that they are all the same allocation priority unless you have a specific purpose you've set that up for. Okay. All right. We'll mention a few more things here, then we'll take some questions. As we come down here, we've got billing. Billing types can be set up for locations in general. You've got some advantages to billing types at location levels and some like problems that you have to think about. So one of the advantages is, let's say I'm doing pick line locations, pick bins, that I'm picking from basically. Well, the nice thing about setting those up as a billing type, you can see I've got my pick bin small or pick bin large. If there's one unit sitting inside that pickable location, I'm going to be charging my customer for that location, right? When it's empty, I'm not charging them. Same concept with a shelf, basically someplace I can store stuff. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to mix location billing with movable unit billing because the system will actually rate the location charge and it'll rate the movable unit charge. So you'll be basically charging them twice if you have a location set up and you have a movable unit inside that location. Um, there is a place where that can work if you wanted to use the location maybe as a premium location and have it charge the movable unit and then charge the premium on top of that. There are possibilities there, but in general, I wouldn't combine the two. Okay, now one of the weak spots for location billing is if in my warehouse I decide to set up location billing and somebody puts more than one pallet in that same location, I'm only getting paid for that location one time. Most warehouses wanted to get paid for each warehouse that they're storing in that location. That's where movable unit billing that we can talk about at some point is much superior to location billing for pallet storage, for example. All right. Any questions there? Probably a good opportunity to stop and see if there's anything new that we need to answer.
No other questions so
Yeah,
far
we're
so
running
good.
really long on time, aren't we?
Yeah, it's 10:40 so you got another 10 minutes here.
Okay, I'm going to make it really quick on the rest of this stuff. We will come back to it if we need to or if there are additional questions. So we ran through the majority of location setup. Directed put away. I am going to skip this for now. I know that some of you may have questions on this. This is really something that um, allows you to decide where product is going to go automatically in the system. There is quite a bit of setup involved in directed put away. It does work and it works well, but it's going to require you to set up dimensions on the locations, dimensions on your product. There's a very strict, basically procedure that you want to follow to make sure you're using that. If anybody's considering directed put away, I would advise you to let your CSM know there is a paid setup option to have somebody go through that with you and help you set that up, basically. Um, and that really covers locations at this point. So, allocation logic, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of allocation logic. It's probably better to get into a detail of how allocation logic works all the way through, maybe in a specific meeting where you might have questions. So let your CSM know if you have deeper questions. Let me just run off to the help article for this. And as you can see, going off to the help articles, I'm going to the help center. I'm just typing in understanding allocation logic. We'll go ahead and click on that, pull it up really quick. And as we run down here, you can see that there's a lot of information here that you can run through to get a better understanding of how the allocation logic works. I like the diagram down here. So I'm going to run to that piece really quick. I think that gives us a high level view. Now there's a lot of pieces in here. What you need to know is everything up here. So this section right here, this is about basically sorting out the inventory. The system does a little bit of sorting. We don't need to get into the sorting right now. You can kind of look through that when you have time, but it kind of pre-sorts the inventory into groups and categories. Um, the order queue right here at the beginning of this, if you have the order queue enabled, the system will basically just skip the auto allocation until you highlight an order and tell it to go ahead and trigger that for allocation. These options right here, basically, when I talk to you about the location type, this is basically asking if pick line locations are out there. If pick line locations are out there, do we need to basically send you to a pick line location or a storage location? And really, when we talk about item setup more, we will talk about that piece a little bit more. All right. So after that, this part is talking about those priorities. And then after we've dealt with priorities, that's when we get to your first in, first out. So this is kind of a high level view. I know this is kind of a more complex topic, but I would take a minute, kind of read through this. Understanding allocation logic can be pretty important to how things operate in the system. Any specific questions on that one before we move on, Charlie?
Nope.
Okay. Oh, before we move past this part of the webinar, I wanted to talk about We were on locations primarily. We're going to come down here to warehouse. We're going to go to import locations. And this gives you the ability to import new locations. There is an import template. You can actually, once again, if we go back to the help articles, you can go type import. We're going to talk a little bit more about import templates in one of the other webinars when we get into like orders and receipts. We're going to kind of spend a little bit more time here. But you can see on the left-hand side as we go down here, there are lots of different import types. If you have any questions about those, feel free to email customer support or use the chat feature. They can help you with some of those if you have questions. Otherwise, there's some good information here to kind of run through to start out with. But basically, this is to create new locations. You can actually even put your locations down in one column on the spreadsheet, just import them in. Just be aware that when you look at those import templates, maybe we should download one and look at it really quick here. But we'll go ahead and go to the location import template right here. Let me just open that up. Might take me a second to open up Excel. There we go. Here's a good example. And a lot of the import templates kind of follow this methodology. You can see down here, there's an instructions page. I've got my page where I do my entry. You have all your headers. The headers are there to help you kind of fill it out to get everything prepped. You can see I've got my field 1, field 2, field 3, field 4. We talked about what those do for you. Remember that field 1 is the important one. We got to have something in field 1 no matter what. You can separate into different fields if you want to. Length, width, height, all those regular kind of dimensions, weight, temperature, description, so on. Here's your allocation priority we talked about. Remember, use the same allocation priority for everything unless you have a specific setting. At my warehouse that I came from, sorry, unless you completely understand how allocation priority works, just use one number is what I'm trying to say there. But at my warehouse, typically I picked a number like 99 or, the 99999. And that way I could actually make things more important if I needed to once I felt more comfortable with that logic, but make sure they're all the same. There is an opportunity for you to review these in bulk, and we're going to get to that in just a second here. Billing type, you can go ahead and set here. By the way, if you're going to set up billing type, you do need to create your billing types over here under admin. And manage billing types is right here someplace. I'm missing it at the moment. Location billing types right here. Okay, so you go to your location billing types. This is where you can set those up. Pretty simple. Go in there. Basically, you're just giving it a name. Whatever you put in the code, use the same name in the description. They show up in different parts of the system. It's easier to identify if you just use the same name for both. Okay. All right, so we'll go back to that import template that we had out there, kind of run through the rest of that really quick. Pick path, we talked pick path. You can go ahead and put your pick paths in. Non-pickable, you're just putting true, false there, basically. Replenish this location, true, false. Max quantity, you can go ahead and put in there as well, okay? By the way, the directed put away fields are not available on the import template, so it's important to know that. All right, we'll come back over here. We talked imports, we talked location, we talked a lot of those different things. Once I've prepped my import template, I can go ahead and hit choose file. I can find that file. I didn't prep one. I should prep one in advance, but when I hit import locations, you will see it in the grid here. Basically, it'll just give you a quick view of what's going to import. And at that point, you can go ahead and create locations. Now, with this particular type of import, it might fail if you've got thousands of locations. You can actually just keep importing that file. It'll skip past the locations that already got created. You can kind of repeat that process until it finishes those imports all the way. Okay. All right. So that is not true of every place that you import things, by the way, but that on the location standpoint, that is true. All right. So the last thing I'm going to show you as far as locations, which is going to wrap us up for this discussion today, is that we're going to go here to warehouse locations. We're going to go to the mass updates. This is a feature that kind of makes it easy to make changes, review your locations, things like that. So we'll go ahead and say, uh, which warehouse do I want to see? I'll go ahead and hit export right here. That's going to allow me to download a text tab delimited text file. Now you can see this is in text, so it's going to be really hard to read. I'm going to just go open it in a spreadsheet application. Give me just 1 second. I'm finding the file. I'm on a Mac. This is going to look a little bit different on a Mac, but just bear with me a little bit. Principle is similar on a Windows machine. You're basically going to right click. You're going to do an open with probably Excel. Um, if you don't know how to do that already, many of you probably do. That's pretty standard functionality. But here I have all of my locations. You can see I've got everything in that first location. Now, if we're going to update, do not touch column A. Column A is, think of that as a key. That is the current way it's displayed. If I wanted to change this location to something else, I can rename locations, if I want to. And I somehow got myself to the very bottom here. Give me just a second. If I was going to rename a location, I could come in here and put a -2 or something like that, whatever I want to do, but I should do that in column B here. Because column A, if I change column A, when I go to import it, I'm going to get an error because it doesn't match properly. So just know that you can go ahead and do that. Let me just get back up here to the top, actually. One moment, please. I'll get us wrapped up. Yeah, it's going to take me a second. Okay, let me get the sidebar here. All right, there we go. Anyway, so you got your fields 1 through 4. The same thing we saw in the regular new item import, or sorry, new location import templates. Um, those fields are the same. Your length, width, height, those are all the same. Here's your allocation priority. When you come into these, most of you know this already, but you can go in and say basically filter. If I go into filter, I can go in and I kind of see the different values really quick. This is pretty similar in Excel for Windows versus Mac, basically same sort of concept. Might help me quickly identify where there are problems. Again, this is a good thing to go look at. I would probably go check that if you haven't already. Make sure they're all the same, unless you completely intend for them to be different. Okay. We'll come over here, location type. You've got an opportunity here to go in and check. You can update these and change these. Keep in mind, it does have to match the same formatting. You can see this is storage, no space location with a capital L. Make sure that you're matching the exact formatting that needs to be in there. Usually I set a couple of locations up the way I want them to. Come in here, go in and basically replicates, down, then I re-import back up if I'm going to make changes. Is this an active location or not? This is a good time to probably mention that with locations, if you create a location and that location gets used anywhere in the system, you cannot delete that location once it's been used. That's a record. It's tied to something. We have to keep that in the system. You can rename it, if you want to, or you can deactivate it. So you can come in either to the user interface and here, when you're actually looking at locations, you can disable enable. By the way, you can delete from here. Again, if the location's never been used, it'll let you delete it. If not, you'll get an error message on that. But coming back to this, activate, deactivate from here. Billing types we mentioned. Once you set up billing types, name those billing types, you'll be able to come in here and use those billing types. Pick path, again, you can set up your pick path. For those of you that aren't as familiar with pick path, really that's kind of the way of kind of intentionally guiding a person. Let's say by default, the system actually uses the same way that a location name would sort on an Excel sheet. That's how the system is going to present the locations to somebody to walk on a pick ticket or on a scan gun. This pick path is the ability for you to go in and override and say, you know what? I know what the location says, but I want them to zigzag down the aisle. I'm going to go to the left side, get what they need from the left side, go to the right side, and work snake zigzag, down that aisle, basically. Some people feel like that's a more efficient way to guide somebody for a walk. That's the intention of the pick path, is to give the ability to control, once those items have been tied to that order, how somebody will walk based on instruction from the pick ticket or the scan gun. Okay. Replenishment. True, false. We'll get into replenishment more later. Non-pickable. We did talk about these at a high level, so this shouldn't be new to anybody. This max is basically in relation to replenishment. Obviously, you're just setting a maximum amount that you want to have in that location. And that really kind of takes us through locations. Charlie, any call outs you can think of that you want to add to this while we're in here?
No, thank you for all that. And we do have